In 2011, during just one afternoon, Anders Breivik embarked on a murderous rampage that would send shockwaves around the globe.
We all had this sensation that an act of war was really taking place.
As the clock ticked, the body count rose.
When thick black smoke spiraled above the streets of Oslo, panic gripped the city. It was a terrifying sight for the citizens of Norway, a country known for its peace and serenity. But as the day unfolded, the horror multiplied, leaving the nation scarred by what would go down as one of the darkest days in its history. The man behind this devastating attack was cunning, manipulative, and shockingly fearless. He disguised himself as someone the public should trust, only to betray that trust in the most horrifying way. And even after his capture, his audacity knew no bounds. He went so far as to demand luxuries while behind bars, including a PlayStation 3. Today we delve into the twisted story of this man, his troubled upbringing, and the devastating impact of his actions that shook Norway to its core. This isn't just a tale of tragedy, but a chilling look into the mind of a man consumed by hatred and delusion. On July 22, 2011, the peace in Oslo was shattered in an instant. It was an ordinary day in the city's government district, with workers settling into their routines. But at precisely 3:25 p.m., a thunderous explosion rocked the area. A massive cloud of smoke rose from the streets, and chaos erupted. The blast originated from a van parked near the government building housing the Prime Minister's office. Its force was so immense that windows shattered across the district, buildings were left in ruins, and multiple fires broke out. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, only to find utter devastation. 8 lives were tragically lost, and over 200 people sustained injuries. As investigators examined the aftermath, it became clear that this was no accident. The culprit had used a homemade bomb made from fertilizer and fuel oil, a deadly combination. Surveillance footage quickly became a critical tool in the investigation. The cameras revealed the van driving into the district before it was parked near the targeted building. Moments later, a man dressed entirely in black exited the vehicle and walked away calmly, vanishing from sight. His movements were deliberate, calculated. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister, the presumed target, was quickly located and confirmed safe. Authorities wasted no time issuing warnings through media channels, urging citizens to steer clear of Oslo's city center. Leads began pouring in, but one, in particular, proved to be pivotal. A witness near the scene had spotted a man in a police uniform entering a red Fiat Doblo and had the foresight to note down the license plate. While this information could have accelerated the investigation, it was initially mishandled. The note sat idle for nearly 20 minutes before being processed, and it took another 2 hours for this vital detail to reach the police radio network. When the authorities finally acted, they traced the license plate to a man named Anders Behring Breivik, a 32-year-old Norwegian. What followed would uncover a man whose actions and motives were as horrifying as his crime. But what motivated him to commit such heinous acts? To answer that, we must explore his troubled past. Anders was born on February 15, 1979, to Jens Breivik, a diplomat, and his wife Vensje. Their marriage was far from harmonious. When Jens sought to relocate the family to London for work, Vensje refused. Their differences ultimately led to divorce, and Vensje returned to Norway with Anders and his half-sister. Jens applied for custody of Anders, but the court ruled in favor of Vensje. It was a decision that would have profound consequences. From a young age, Anders exhibited troubling behaviors, described as antisocial and difficult to manage. Vensje sought professional help, which led to him undergoing psychological evaluations. The findings were unsettling. Anders displayed an eerie lack of emotion and was described as having a peculiar smile that never reached his eyes. His mother's treatment of him only deepened the psychological scars. Vensje reportedly harbored resentment toward her son, referring to him as a demon child and claiming he had been difficult even in the womb. She subjected him to verbal abuse, telling him she wished he had never been born. Vensje's behavior crossed even more alarming boundaries, mixing cruelty with inappropriate affection. Her erratic actions and severe mental health struggles including a borderline personality disorder diagnosis, made her unfit to raise Anders. At one point, he was placed in foster care. However, Venture managed to regain custody after promising to follow strict supervision guidelines. Tragically, this supervision was discontinued after only a few visits. Anders was left to grow up under the shadow of his mother's instability. Despite the chaos at home, Anders appeared outwardly normal to those around him. He was intelligent, physically strong, and even protective of his peers at school. Yet, beneath this exterior, his mother's actions had planted the seeds of deep resentment and insecurity. As he entered his teenage years, Anders began to rebel. He turned to graffiti, earning him several run-ins with the police. Around this time, his relationship with his father deteriorated. Although he spent time in Paris with Jens, their bond eventually broke, leaving Anders feeling abandoned by both parents. His later teenage years saw a shift in focus. He became obsessed with physical fitness, striving to build a powerful physique. Yet, despite his outward strength, there were cracks in his confidence. He was even deemed unfit for military service, though the reasons remain unclear. In adulthood, Anders dabbled in various ventures. He worked in marketing, joined Norway's far-right Progress Party, and tried his hand at entrepreneurship. He founded multiple businesses, including a diploma forgery company, which brought him significant wealth. But wealth wasn't his end goal. Anders had bigger, far more sinister plans. In May 2011, he rented a farmhouse in rural Norway. On the surface, it seemed like an ordinary move, but in reality, he was stockpiling materials for his devastating attack. Using his status as a farmer, he acquired large amounts of fertilizer, which he then turned into a deadly bomb. 5 days before the attack, Anders posted a cryptic message on Twitter. "One person with a belief is equal to the force of 100,000 who only have interests." It was a chilling hint of what was to come. On July 22, 2011, Anders carried out the first phase of his plan by detonating the bomb in Oslo's government district. But as horrific as this attack was, it was only the beginning. Following the bombing in Oslo, Anders headed toward Utøya Island, the site of a summer camp organized by the Workers' Youth League. This camp was a peaceful gathering for young activists, many of whom aspired to make a positive impact on society. Little did they know that Anders had set his sights on them for the second phase of his devastating plan. Disguised as a police officer, Anders approached the ferry that transported people to Utøya. Carrying a heavy arsenal of weapons, he claimed to be conducting a routine security check following the explosion in Oslo. Trusting his uniform, the ferry staff allowed him to board without suspicion. By the time Anders reached the island, it was around 5 p.m. He immediately gathered the camp participants, stating that he was there to ensure their safety. Then, in a horrifying twist, he opened fire. Panic erupted as Anders targeted anyone in sight, moving through the island with calculated precision. Many fled toward the water, attempting to swim to safety, while others tried to hide in the island's dense woods. For over an hour, Anders continued his rampage, showing no mercy. By the time police arrived, 69 lives had been tragically cut short, most of them teenagers. The youngest victim was just 14 years old. Survivors described the attack as a nightmare, with some playing dead among the bodies to avoid detection. Anders surrendered without resistance when the police confronted him, claiming he had achieved his mission. The magnitude of his crimes shocked not only Norway but the entire world. People struggled to comprehend how one man could harbor such hatred and execute such a meticulously planned act of terror. As the investigation unfolded, Anders's motives became horrifyingly clear. He had spent years harboring extremist ideologies, fueled by his disdain for multiculturalism and his belief that Norway's traditional values were under threat. He viewed the ruling Labour Party and its youth wing as symbols of this perceived erosion. To him, they represented the policies that had encouraged immigration and diversity, policies he irrationally blamed for the so-called decline of Norwegian society. Anders saw himself as a soldier in what he believed was a cultural war. His twisted ideology stemmed from years of consuming far-right propaganda online. His manifesto, which spanned 1,500 pages, was a disturbing mixture of personal grievances, conspiracy theories, and hate-filled rhetoric. It detailed not only his ideology, but also step-by-step plans for carrying out acts of terror. Shockingly, Anders referred to his attack as marketing, a way to promote his beliefs and inspire others to follow his lead. The days following the attack were filled with grief, anger, and disbelief. Vigils were held across Norway as the nation mourned the victims. Families and friends of those who lost their lives struggled to comprehend the sheer scale of the tragedy. World leaders condemned Anders's actions and expressed solidarity with the Norwegian people. In a rare display of unity, politicians across the spectrum called for resilience, emphasizing that hatred would not divide the nation. When his trial began in April 2012, Anders showed no remorse. He used the courtroom as a platform to further spread his ideology, often interrupting proceedings with bizarre and inflammatory statements. His defense revolved around the claim that his actions were necessary to save Norway and Europe from cultural destruction. Psychiatric evaluations became a critical aspect of the trial. The initial assessment concluded that Anders suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and was therefore unfit for trial. However, a second evaluation disputed this, determining that he was fully aware of his actions and their consequences. Ultimately, the court ruled him mentally competent, sentencing him to 21 years in prison, the maximum penalty under Norwegian law, with the possibility of indefinite extensions. Even in prison, Anders continued to seek attention. He filed numerous complaints about his living conditions, often demanding what many saw as luxuries rather than necessities. His infamous demand for a PlayStation 3 to replace his PlayStation 2 drew widespread criticism and was viewed as a grotesque mockery of justice. Anders also attempted to sue the Norwegian government, claiming his human rights were being violated. While a lower court initially ruled in his favor regarding some claims, a higher court later dismissed most of them, reaffirming that his prison conditions met legal standards. The trial and its aftermath became a pivotal moment for Norway. It forced the nation to confront not only the horrors of extremism, but also the challenge of balancing justice with its commitment to human rights. Through it all, Norway remained steadfast in its principles, determined not to let hatred define its future. The attacks left an indelible mark on Norway. In response, the government strengthened its security measures and increased efforts to combat extremism. However, the tragedy also sparked a broader discussion about the balance between security and the open democratic values Norway cherishes. Memorials have been established to honor the victims, serving as a reminder of the lives lost and the resilience of those who survived. Survivors and families of the victims continue to advocate for peace and tolerance, ensuring that the lessons from this dark chapter in Norway's history are never forgotten. Anders Behring Breivik's actions may have been driven by hatred, but they failed to achieve the division he sought. Instead, they united a nation in grief and determination to uphold its values of compassion and democracy. The story of July 22, 2011, is a painful reminder of how one individual's hatred can bring unimaginable suffering. But it's also a testament to the strength of a nation that chose unity over fear. What are your thoughts on the importance of combating hate and extremism in today's world? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into stories that shaped our world.